What happens when one of the most famous women in the world shows up at a red carpet event, fully prepared, perfectly styled, cameras flashing everywhere, only to be turned away? Imagine the scene: a sea of glittering gowns, flashing lights, the hum of anticipation in the air, and in the middle of it all, Meghan Markle, the Duchess turned global celebrity, standing stunned as security steps forward with a message that seems impossible. Not invited. Thrown out. Denied entry to the 2025 CFDA Fashion Awards. But how did it come to this? And more importantly, why does it matter now? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. From the moment Meghan stepped onto the global stage, every move she made became public property. Every smile, every outfit, every word dissected by millions. Some celebrated her rise, others scrutinized it, waiting for the smallest slip to declare judgment. The fashion world, like Hollywood and royalty combined, is a minefield of politics, power plays, and carefully guarded secrets. The CFDA Fashion Awards are more than just a red carpet moment. They are a culmination of influence, fame, and prestige. To be excluded is more than embarrassment. It is a public declaration that someone, somewhere, has decided you do not belong. And this is precisely what happened to Meghan on that fateful night. The story begins months before the red carpet incident, in hushed whispers and backstage corridors. Insiders had been talking about Meghan's possible attendance. Some were excited, some were wary. There were subtle signs of tension in previous CFDA events. Meghan had been making waves, not always with her style, but with her presence. Her past appearances, while celebrated by fans, had reportedly ruffled feathers among certain influential designers. Was it jealousy, personal grudges, or calculated strategy? Perhaps a combination of all three. Whatever the case, the stage was being set, and no one, least of all Meghan, realized just how precarious her position had become. The night itself was a storm waiting to happen. The CFDA red carpet is a theater of spectacle. Cameras flash incessantly, capturing every glimmer of designer fabric, every flutter of a gown, every calculated pose. Celebrities are not just walking, they are performing. Every glance and gesture carries meaning, whether intentional or not. In the midst of this orchestrated chaos, Meghan arrived, radiant, poised, and ready to take her place among the fashion elite. She had her hair styled perfectly, her makeup flawless, and a gown designed to turn heads. But the moment she stepped forward, the current shifted. Security approached. Whispers spread like wildfire. And then, the words came. She was not invited. For a moment, it felt surreal. Was this a mistake? A clerical error? Surely not. Not when cameras were rolling, when journalists were ready to capture every reaction. Meghan, used to commanding attention, was suddenly powerless in the face of a decision that had been made without her knowledge. The world was watching, and the humiliation was immediate. Yet, behind the public spectacle, there was more at play than mere oversight. This was about influence, about power, and about decisions made in shadows, decisions that had consequences far beyond a single red carpet event. You might ask, who had orchestrated this? Why exclude someone of Meghan's stature? The CFDA is not just a ceremony, it is a statement. Invitations are carefully curated. They are social currency, a form of validation. To be denied is to be publicly diminished. And in Meghan's case, there were whispers that the decision was not merely administrative but personal. Rivalries, old grievances, and carefully placed messages had converged to create a perfect storm. And the result was a spectacle that no one could ignore. But let's step back for a moment. Think about what it feels like to be turned away in public, stripped of access and recognition in an arena where image and perception are everything. For Meghan, it wasn't just the denial. It was the realization that her presence, her fame, and even her carefully constructed persona could be questioned and rejected. It raised questions about power dynamics, about who decides who belongs in the inner circles of influence, and about the invisible forces shaping public perception. These are not idle musings. They are the mechanisms by which fame and status operate in high-stakes arenas like the CFDA. And the reactions were immediate. Social media erupted in speculation. Fans and critics alike weighed in. Headlines screamed about the incident. Some defended Meghan, decrying the decision as unfair. Others suggested it was a calculated rebuke, a consequence of previous missteps, or an inevitable clash of personalities. Yet, the public narrative only scratched the surface. Behind the flashes and tweets, a far more complex story was unfolding. A story of backstage intrigue, personal vendettas, and strategic maneuvering that no camera could capture. The drama was real, and it was multi-layered. Meanwhile, Meghan herself faced a personal dilemma. How do you respond to public exclusion without giving your detractors more ammunition? How do you maintain composure while the world watches your every reaction? It's a delicate dance, a high-wire act of emotional restraint and strategic thinking. Every gesture is interpreted, every glance analyzed, every word scrutinized. And for someone accustomed to being in control, the sudden loss of agency can be both shocking and instructive. In Meghan's case, it forced a confrontation with her own vulnerabilities and with the people who thrived on exposing them. As the night unfolded, the atmosphere was electric. Cameras focused on other stars, capturing their entrance, their interactions, their triumphs. Meghan, denied her moment in the spotlight, was left to navigate the chaos from the periphery. The experience was a stark reminder that fame is never absolute, and access to elite circles is contingent on acceptance, compliance, and sometimes the favor of unseen influencers. The red carpet is a microcosm of society's hierarchies, a stage where status is constantly negotiated and enforced. And for Meghan, this night was a lesson in just how volatile that hierarchy could be. Yet, despite the humiliation, despite the whispers and the flashbulbs, there was a story of resilience waiting to emerge. Meghan is no stranger to scrutiny or controversy. She has faced public challenges before, navigating the treacherous waters of media speculation, royal protocol, and celebrity culture. But the CFDA incident was different. It was immediate, public, and deeply personal. The world witnessed her exclusion in real time, yet what unfolded next remained largely unseen. Behind the velvet ropes, there were conversations, confrontations, and maneuvers that would shape the narrative in unexpected ways. This is where the real drama begins. The incident is not merely a red carpet anecdote. It is a story of power, strategy, and the fragile nature of public favor. It raises questions about loyalty, influence, and the hidden hierarchies within elite social circles. It asks the audience to consider, how do reputations rise and fall? Who holds the power to grant or deny access? And most importantly, what lengths will people go to in order to assert dominance in a world where perception is everything? And then, there's the cliffhanger. What Meghan did after being denied entry, the private confrontations, the whispered warnings backstage. These are details the public has yet to fully grasp. The real story is not just about exclusion. It's about secrets, betrayals, and revelations that could change the way we view not just Meghan Markle, but the world she navigates. The CFDA red carpet incident is only the beginning. Behind it lies a tangled web of intrigue, ambition, and high-stakes drama that no one saw coming. By the time you finish this video, you will see every twist, every betrayal, every hidden maneuver that led to this explosive night. You will understand why Meghan was denied, who benefited from her absence, and what it reveals about power, fame, and influence in 2025. And as the story unfolds, you'll be left asking, was this simply a red carpet scandal, or was it something far more calculated? A warning, a rebuke, and a dramatic reshaping of the public narrative surrounding one of the world's most watched women? The night may have started with flashing cameras and glittering gowns, but it ended with shock, questions, and consequences that reverberated far beyond the red carpet. And what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What exactly happens behind the glitz and glamour of a major fashion awards night? What unseen gears start turning long before the cameras flash, the gowns sparkle, and the champagne flows? To understand Meghan Markle's shocking exclusion from the 2025 CFDA Fashion Awards, we have to go back months, backstage, in whispered conversations, in the hushed corridors where invitations are decided and reputations are silently forged or destroyed. It all begins with the nature of the CFDA itself. The Council of Fashion Designers of America isn't just a platform to celebrate couture or the latest red carpet trends. It is a hierarchy, a labyrinthine ecosystem of influence, favors, grudges, and politics. Invitations are not handed out randomly. They are earned, calculated, and sometimes weaponized. Designers, PR teams, and insiders maintain a delicate balance of alliances. Missing the mark can mean you're relegated to the shadows, and being noticed in the wrong way can make you a target. In Meghan's case, she had already been walking a tightrope for years. Her entrance into Hollywood and high society had been lauded by some, scrutinized by others, and feared by a few who wield real influence behind closed doors. Months before the awards, whispers circulated among fashion insiders. Questions like, will Meghan attend this year? And does she even want to? Started appearing in private chats and group texts, far away from public eyes. Some insiders were eager to see her there, seeing it as a chance to showcase a celebrity collaboration. Others, quietly influential figures, viewed her presence as a threat, not to her style, not to her fame, but to the subtle ecosystem of power they had cultivated over decades. Meghan's celebrity aura was undeniable, but it also had the potential to overshadow, to disrupt, to destabilize carefully orchestrated networks of approval. And in the world of elite fashion, destabilization is the kind of disruption that is never forgotten. Yet, from the public's perspective, Meghan's attendance seemed inevitable. She had already been in the news for previous red carpet appearances, her style choices lauded, and her personal brand polished to perfection. Social media predicted her look, outlets speculated about her gown, and fans eagerly awaited every step she would take. But no one outside the inner circles understood that her invitation, or the lack thereof, was already a source of heated debate months before the night even arrived. The decision-makers behind the CFDA, with their layered hierarchies and personal stakes, had quietly discussed her inclusion. Opinions were divided. Arguments were heated. And behind the polished veneer of diplomacy, subtle campaigns were taking place to influence the final verdict. Would Meghan walk that red carpet or not? Meanwhile, Meghan herself was preparing, as she always did. Every appearance is calculated. The gown, the jewelry, the hair, the makeup, all designed to project influence, elegance, and presence. She would consult stylists, assess designers, and review the optics of every possible photograph. But even with meticulous preparation, there are forces beyond her control. Invitations can be revoked, logistics can shift, and whispers can become directives. Was she aware of the tension building behind the scenes? Unlikely. Public figures often operate with incomplete knowledge, shielded from the political undercurrents until it is too late. And yet, the story wasn't merely about fashion. It was about history, precedent, and symbolism. The CFDA has long been a battleground for inclusion and exclusion, a reflection of society's most subtle power dynamics. Celebrities are not just guests. They are symbols, instruments of influence. Meghan's potential appearance carried weight. It signaled acceptance or rejection, depending on how the decision was framed. Those deciding her fate understood this. They knew the optics, the headlines, the potential for viral moments. And they made calculations accordingly. Every whisper, every hesitation, every backstage conversation mattered. Every decision could shift the narrative in ways few imagined. To understand this fully, consider the contradictions in Meghan's position. She is famous, yet sometimes unwelcome. She wields global influence, yet her presence is scrutinized by the narrow circles that dictate the social hierarchies of elite fashion. She is celebrated publicly, yet quietly judged privately. Does this tension feel familiar? Perhaps it reminds us that in many arenas, fashion, politics, business, public success can mask hidden vulnerabilities. And in Meghan's case, those vulnerabilities were about to be exposed in front of a global audience. Backstage, conversations began to heat up. Designers exchanged notes about who should be allowed, who might overshadow, and who could be tolerated. The language was subtle, almost cryptic to outsiders, but the implications were clear. A single decision could tilt the balance of the evening. Emails, texts, and private calls moved rapidly. Influencers and gatekeepers weighed in, expressing opinions in coded language. She might bring attention, but not the right kind. One insider reportedly said. She has charm, yes, but it could overshadow the designers, another added. These were not idle musings. These were strategic assessments, the kind that could determine whether Meghan would walk the red carpet or be halted before her first step. At the same time, the media began to pick up on the undercurrents. Industry journalists, attuned to subtle shifts in guest lists and designer interactions, noticed patterns. Rumors of a possible exclusion started circulating, whispered on social media and private forums. Fans speculated, insiders debated, and the tension built silently, unseen by the public but palpable in every backstage corridor. The seeds of the red carpet disaster were already planted. And then there was the human factor. Personal relationships matter. Friendships, rivalries, and grudges have long memories. Meghan's past interactions, some positive, some contentious, played a role. Designers and influencers who had felt slighted in the past saw an opportunity. Some may have framed her as a risk, others as a liability, and some simply saw an opening for leverage in the public narrative. The layers of calculation were staggering. Every smile, every handshake, every private comment could now be leveraged, manipulated, or weaponized. It was also a lesson in timing. Invitations are sent with precision, often accompanied by subtle cues about expected behavior, wardrobe, and alliances. Those on the inside are acutely aware of the signals being sent. The CFDA is not merely a party, it is a theater of power. To be denied entry is to be publicly minimized, to have your influence questioned, to become a topic of conversation for all the wrong reasons. And Meghan, for all her experience navigating public scrutiny, was about to experience this firsthand. Imagine standing on the threshold of one of the most prestigious fashion events in the world, fully aware of your visibility, and suddenly realizing that your presence is no longer welcomed. The initial shock gives way to a cascade of questions. Who made the decision? Why? Was it personal? Professional? Strategic? And most importantly, how will the world react? These questions were circulating not just in Meghan's mind, but in the minds of everyone watching her trajectory. And the answers were deliberately obscured, hidden behind polite smiles and carefully constructed statements. And yet, despite all the tension, the stage was being set. The public only sees the glamour, the red carpet, the applause. But behind the velvet ropes, in the planning rooms and private offices, a complex chess game unfolds. Each move, each whisper, each subtle action contributes to the eventual outcome. For Meghan, the culmination of months of behind-the-scenes maneuvering would soon manifest in a single, dramatic moment, one that would be captured, scrutinized, and dissected by millions. But what no one outside the inner circle yet realized was that Meghan's exclusion was not an isolated event. It was the product of long-term strategies, personal rivalries, and carefully placed influence. It was the intersection of fame, power, and envy. And as the night approached, the forces aligned in a way that would ensure maximum impact. The build-up to the CFDA was not simply about fashion. It was about control, perception, and the fragile nature of celebrity status. And in that delicate web, Meghan was about to discover just how volatile the world of elite influence could be. As the final preparations were made, invitations double-checked, and guest lists finalized, one thing became painfully clear. The red carpet was no longer a guaranteed stage for Meghan Markle. The questions that lingered backstage were sharp and pointed. Would she be allowed in? Would she make a scene? And what did it say about her influence if she were denied? The answers remained uncertain, and that uncertainty carried a weight that the cameras could not capture. The moment of truth was approaching, and it would be more shocking than anyone anticipated. What came next would not just be a public embarrassment. It would set off a chain reaction of media frenzy, celebrity gossip, and social media storm. The build-up months in the making, the whispers, the hidden maneuvers, the personal rivalries, all of it would converge in a single moment on the red carpet. And when that moment arrived, it would be more dramatic, more scandalous, and more consequential than anyone outside the inner circle could have imagined. And just as the event doors were about to open, as photographers readied their cameras and the world prepared to watch history unfold, the final twist of the night was about to reveal itself. Meghan Markle, in all her poise and elegance, was about to encounter the ultimate question of influence and power. Would the world embrace her, or would the gatekeepers of fashion make sure she remained outside, waiting and watching, while the show went on without her? The build-up was complete. The moment of reckoning was near. And what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What would it feel like to arrive at one of the most prestigious events in the fashion world, expecting applause, admiration, and camera flashes, only to be met with confusion, tension, and denial? Imagine the air thick with anticipation, the flashing lights bouncing off sequined gowns, the scent of perfume and expensive champagne mixing in the night air. Every eye is on the red carpet. Every lens is focused on the next star to make their entrance. And yet, for Meghan Markle, the moment she stepped into this carefully curated spectacle, something was off. From the very first step, there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Normally, the red carpet operates like a well-oiled machine. Photographers know their spots, celebrities follow their planned entrances, assistants ensure that gowns fall perfectly, and the public cheers or waits in breathless anticipation. But this night was different. There was an unspoken tension, a current of hesitation among those responsible for coordinating the arrivals. Staff glanced at each other. Whispers passed quickly from one corner to another, and Meghan, poised as ever, began to sense that something wasn't right. Cameras clicked relentlessly, capturing every detail. The delicate movement of her dress, the way her hair shimmered under the lights, the subtle tension in her expression. Reporters leaned forward, eager for the next viral moment, not realizing that they were on the brink of witnessing a public exclusion that would dominate headlines for days. Photographers, always alert to drama, noticed the hesitation among the event staff and sensed that this night was about to go off script. Meghan's arrival, meant to be a triumphant entrance, quickly transformed into a spectacle of confusion. Security personnel, normally invisible in the grand theater of the red carpet, stepped forward with deliberate movements that seemed to signal caution. Their expressions were serious, almost apologetic, but firm. The whispers grew louder, the instructions more urgent, and Meghan, accustomed to commanding rooms with a mere glance, felt herself being met with resistance she had never anticipated. This moment was more than a logistical mishap. Every elite fashion event is a performance, and performers rely on each other to maintain the flow. To disrupt that flow is to create a vulnerability, a crack in the armor. Meghan, suddenly faced with this disruption, became acutely aware of just how much power could reside in the hands of those controlling access. Who decides who enters and who doesn't? How quickly can the script be rewritten in the blink of an eye? And what does it mean when the very people meant to facilitate your presence become obstacles instead? Insiders would later describe the scene as a mixture of chaos and precision. Staff moved quickly, whispering in hushed tones, clearly aware of the cameras and their potential to capture controversy. Photographers sensed that something was amiss and shifted their attention, some snapping more aggressively, hoping to catch a reaction. Reporters leaned in, trying to interpret the subtle cues, the half-smiles, the glances, and the small gestures that revealed more than words ever could. Meghan, however, maintained her composure. Years of navigating public scrutiny had honed her ability to manage appearances even in high-pressure situations. Yet, even the most experienced public figure cannot fully control a scenario that is unfolding against them in real time. She scanned the faces around her, looking for familiarity, for reassurance, for a sign that this was merely a misunderstanding. Instead, she found only polite distance and careful avoidance. There was no welcome, no acknowledgement of her status, only a professional, but firm, boundary that could not be ignored. And then came the words, quiet yet devastating. "I'm sorry, you're not on the guest list." Imagine hearing that in the midst of a camera-filled frenzy, your public image on full display, your intentions misunderstood, your expectations completely upended. For any celebrity, this would be jarring. For Meghan, someone who has spent years crafting a global persona, navigating scrutiny and praise alike, this was an entirely new kind of public vulnerability. The shock rippled through her. Disbelief, confusion, and then a flood of questions. Why? Who made this decision? How could such a mistake occur at an event of this magnitude? The cameras captured the moment with perfect clarity. Meghan paused, the slight tilt of her head, the measured breath, the controlled expression masking internal tension. Photographers snapped relentlessly, and every image would later be analyzed for signs of embarrassment, composure, or defiance. The public wouldn't know the half of it. The backstage negotiations, the whispers, The decisions that had led to this moment were invisible to them. Yet the impact was immediate. Social media erupted within seconds. Headlines flashed across screens. Meghan Markle denied entry to CFDA red carpet. Shocking exclusion stuns fans. What really happened behind the velvet rope? The tension was compounded by the surrounding celebrities. Stars glided past, some casting curious glances, others offering sympathetic smiles. The contrast was stark. Meghan stopped in her tracks, while the rest of the elite continued forward, seamlessly integrated into the spectacle. Every photographer, every camera lens, every observer was now aware that a disruption had occurred. And with awareness came speculation, judgment, and analysis. What had caused this? Was it oversight, malice, or strategic exclusion? Security personnel remained firm yet discreet, trying to manage the optics while maintaining control over the situation. Event staff whispered hurriedly, occasionally glancing toward Meghan, perhaps anticipating a reaction that might escalate the scene. It was a delicate balance, a high-stakes negotiation of presence and power, executed in real time. For Meghan, each passing second felt monumental, each pause weighted with uncertainty. Audience members watching the event unfold in real time, both in person and online, had no idea of the complexity behind the scenes. Social media users began theorizing immediately. Some blamed event organizers, others speculated about rivalries or personal vendettas. The narrative was already taking shape, independent of reality. And while speculation ran rampant outside, Meghan was experiencing the human element of exclusion in its rawest form: shock, embarrassment, and the need to respond strategically under pressure. Then came the subtle confrontations. An assistant approached Meghan, offering a polite explanation, a small smile, but the words carried weight. "I'm afraid the decision isn't something we can change." Imagine hearing that as cameras continue flashing, as the world watches every reaction. What choices do you make? Do you push forward, demand recognition, or retreat gracefully? Meghan, known for her calculated public presence, now had to navigate the uncertainty of authority, expectation, and optics in real time. Every step she took, every glance she made, was being analyzed. Public perception matters, but so does the unseen network of influence behind the scenes. Designers, PR managers, and event organizers had already made a decision that carried consequences for months, if not years, of reputational capital. Meghan was caught in the middle, a visible symbol of a hidden struggle, her exclusion a dramatic punctuation mark in a story no one had yet written in full. As she paused, gathering her composure, photographers continued to capture the tension, the disbelief, and the subtle expressions that would later become viral images. Social media users dissected each frame: the slight raise of her eyebrow, the controlled tilt of her head, the poised hands attempting to mask frustration. Every public gesture became fodder for commentary, and every analysis carried emotional weight for both supporters and critics. By now, whispers of backstage chaos had begun to surface. Some insiders hinted at deliberate exclusion, a coordinated effort by influential figures to send a message. Others speculated about simple administrative errors, miscommunication, or last-minute changes in guest lists. But the pattern was clear. This was not a routine hiccup. This was a calculated disruption, a moment designed to leave an impact, to be noticed, and to provoke a response. And Meghan, fully aware of the implications, faced a critical choice. She could challenge the decision publicly, potentially escalating the situation into a spectacle with global media attention. Or she could withdraw, maintaining dignity but accepting the exclusion in silence. Every action carried risk. Every word, gesture, or absence would be scrutinized, and every observer, inside and outside the event, was waiting for her move. But even in this chaos, there were hints of resilience. Meghan's years in the public eye had prepared her for high-pressure scrutiny. She maintained composure, measured her expressions, and navigated the situation with strategic awareness. Yet, as the moment stretched on, the tension intensified, and the true scope of the situation began to reveal itself. What was unfolding was not merely a red carpet incident. It was a carefully orchestrated, high-stakes confrontation with unseen forces, and the world was about to witness its first explosive consequences. And just as she adjusted her gown, preparing to confront the unexpected barrier, a subtle but significant shift occurred backstage. Whispers intensified, gestures became sharper, and the final revelation that would define the night was approaching. Cameras, photographers, reporters, and social media were all watching, but they did not yet know the half of it. What came next would ignite a media frenzy, provoke celebrity reactions, and reveal a hidden network of influence that few outside the elite fashion world could comprehend. And no one on the red carpet was ready for what would happen next. Have you ever been stopped at the threshold of something you were certain was yours to enter? Imagine the moment when the anticipation, the preparation, the meticulous planning of months, all of it, comes to a sudden, inexplicable halt. That is exactly what Meghan Markle experienced that night at the 2025 CFDA Fashion Awards. The red carpet, the cameras, the flashing lights, it all became a stage not for celebration, but for shock, confusion, and a profound sense of exclusion. As Meghan stood there, poised and radiant, a wave of disbelief washed over her. The words repeated in her mind, not invited, excluded, denied. And yet, from the outside, everything seemed normal. Celebrities glided past, assistants guided them gracefully, flashes erupted in rhythm with their steps. For the untrained eye, it was another glamorous night at the CFDA. But for Meghan, the moment was an emotional jolt, a public revelation that cut deeper than any headline ever could. How could this happen? How could someone as prominent, as globally recognized as Meghan Markle, be excluded from an event she had every reason to attend? The answer, as insiders later revealed, lies in a combination of backstage politics, long-standing grudges, and strategic influence. Invitations to the CFDA are far from arbitrary. They are curated with precision, designed not just to honor the deserving but to signal alliances, enforce hierarchies, and maintain the delicate ecosystem of power within the fashion world. Backstage, whispers rippled like electric currents. Designers consulted each other discreetly, event coordinators shifted uneasily, and a silent tension built among those tasked with enforcing the guest list. Some insiders claimed that the decision to exclude Meghan was deliberate, a statement sent by the inner circle of power, a warning wrapped in politeness, a calculated message disguised as administrative oversight. Others argued that it was a culmination of accumulated grievances, a convergence of small slights, and perceived missteps over time. Whatever the reason, the outcome was the same. Meghan was officially, publicly, and irrevocably not on the guest list. The immediate reaction was a complex mix of disbelief and measured composure. Meghan's staff, trained in crisis management, attempted to clarify the situation, speaking to event organizers and security. But the response was unequivocal. Her presence could not be accommodated. The message was polite, almost perfunctory, but it carried the unmistakable weight of finality. It was the kind of rejection that is as much psychological as it is procedural, an invisible barrier that is more humiliating precisely because it leaves little room for debate or negotiation. Every flash of the camera, every lens pointed in her direction, amplified the moment. Journalists sensed the tension instantly. They could see it in the subtle shift in her posture, the controlled movements of her hands, the brief narrowing of her eyes as she processed the unfolding reality. These visual cues, though minor, were enough to fuel speculation. Social media, as expected, exploded within seconds. Clips circulated showing the pause, the hesitation, the almost imperceptible glance exchanged with an assistant. And within minutes, the narrative began to form. Meghan Markle, the global celebrity, had been denied entry to the CFDA Fashion Awards. It's worth considering why this public revelation was so potent. In a world where celebrity status is currency, public exclusion is a form of social devaluation. The optics are brutal. It is one thing to be excluded quietly, behind closed doors, where the public never sees. It is another to be denied access in front of a global audience, where cameras and social media amplify every nuance. For Meghan, whose every move is scrutinized, this was a double blow. Personal embarrassment intertwined with the inescapable gaze of public perception. The uninvited revelation carried immediate consequences. Photographers, ever alert to drama, captured every reaction, creating an archive of images that would dominate news cycles. Fans expressed outrage, confusion, and disbelief. Fashion commentators debated the implications. Social media users dissected each moment, reading into her body language, her gestures, and even the silence that followed. The world, in real time, was witnessing a power play that had been invisible until that precise moment. And yet, for all the public attention, the deeper drama remained hidden. Who had orchestrated this exclusion? Some claimed it was a coordinated effort by influential designers who had been previously slighted by Meghan or felt threatened by her presence. Others suggested it was the result of backstage politics, alliances, and rivalries that had little to do with her personally and everything to do with maintaining influence within the CFDA ecosystem. The truth, as often happens in high-stakes social circles, was likely a combination of both. Personal grievances wrapped in professional strategy, executed with precision to maximize impact. Meghan herself had to make split-second decisions. To challenge the denial publicly would have escalated the moment, potentially turning it into a media spectacle beyond even the intense scrutiny she was accustomed to. To retreat silently risked appearing weak, uncertain, or defeated. The stakes were immense. Every choice carried potential consequences, not only for her public image, but for future opportunities in Hollywood and beyond. She was navigating a minefield where one misstep could have long-lasting implications. While Meghan processed the denial, insiders behind the velvet ropes were equally attentive. Designers, stylists, and event coordinators monitored her every movement, assessing whether she would push back or comply gracefully. Some viewed the moment as a test of composure, others as an opportunity to assert control over the narrative. The air was thick with tension, a mixture of anticipation, judgment, and strategy. And in that charged atmosphere, the stakes were not just about one red carpet appearance. They were about influence, perception, and the unseen hierarchies that govern elite social circles. What made the revelation even more striking was the contrast with the rest of the guests. Celebrities glided past, perfectly aligned with the choreography of the red carpet, fully aware of their access and acceptance. Their ease, their confidence, and their seamless entry highlighted Meghan's abrupt disruption. The visual and emotional contrast was stark, magnifying the drama and setting the stage for an intense media storm. The message was clear: inclusion is conditional, and exclusion, especially public exclusion, is a powerful tool in controlling the social narrative. And then came the emotional spike, the internal moment that no camera could fully capture. Meghan, accustomed to being in control, suddenly faced vulnerability in the most public way possible. Shock, disbelief, frustration, all mingled with a carefully measured composure. She had been prepared for scrutiny, criticism, and debate, but not for the invisible forces that had now manifested in a very visible, very undeniable way. The moment demanded poise, but also strategy. How to navigate humiliation without losing influence. How to respond publicly while assessing the private consequences. How to maintain dignity while the world speculated. Meanwhile, social media amplified the moment in unpredictable ways. Tweets, Instagram stories, and viral clips circulated almost instantaneously, each adding layers of interpretation, speculation, and sometimes outright fabrication. Memes emerged, some mocking, some sympathetic, all reinforcing the narrative of Meghan's public exclusion. The audience was no longer passive. They were participants, commentators, and amplifiers. The red carpet, in that instant, became a global stage where the drama of exclusion was witnessed, dissected, and debated in real time. But the full story remained hidden. While the cameras captured the surface, the pause, the hesitation, the polite gestures of denial, the underlying forces were invisible. Who decided she would be denied? What rivalries, calculations, or strategies had shaped the decision? What unseen influence had tipped the balance against her? These questions would haunt the story, teasing revelations yet to come. And as Meghan continued to navigate the immediate consequences, one thing was clear: this was not just a red carpet incident. It was a turning point, a moment where influence, perception, and personal stakes collided in a way that no one had anticipated. And then, just as she adjusted her posture, preparing for what to do next, a subtle but significant shift occurred. A designer approached the edge of the red carpet, whispering to a colleague, glancing in Meghan's direction. The cameras didn't catch the exchange, the public didn't see the glance, but the tension was palpable. Something had been set in motion backstage, a move that would escalate the drama even further, drawing in media, celebrities, and social media in a frenzy that no one could control. What came next would reveal not only the true power dynamics at play, but also a hidden web of personal grudges, professional strategy, and calculated exclusion that had been brewing for months. And the reaction, when it unfolded, would shock everyone, both on the red carpet and around the world. What happens when influence, rivalry, and secrecy converge behind the glamour of a red carpet event? Most of us see only the glittering gowns, the flashes of cameras, and the carefully curated smiles. But behind the velvet ropes, an entirely different world exists, one of subtle maneuvers, whispered alliances, and calculated exclusion. The 2025 CFDA Fashion Awards were no exception. Meghan Markle's shocking denial of entry wasn't a random oversight. It was the culmination of months, maybe even years, of strategic positioning, backstage politics, and personal grudges. To understand the full scope, we have to step away from the camera flashes and look behind the curtains. In elite fashion circles, influence isn't just about who wears the best designer. It's about who controls perception, who can shape narratives, and who can signal inclusion or exclusion. Designers, PR agents, and insiders wield power in ways that rarely reach public view. They decide who gets media coverage, which celebrity collaborations succeed, and even who earns a coveted spot on the guest list of prestigious events like the CFDA. And in Meghan's case, multiple forces were quietly working against her, setting the stage for a dramatic confrontation on the red carpet. Months before the event, a series of subtle maneuvers were already underway. Invitations had been discussed in private meetings, emails circulated, and quiet consultations held between designers and event organizers. Some insiders argued that Meghan's presence could overshadow other guests, steal attention from carefully curated fashion statements, or disrupt the hierarchy of influence that certain designers maintained. Others viewed her as a wild card, a global celebrity whose presence brought attention but also unpredictability. And in this world, unpredictability can be dangerous. What makes these power plays so fascinating is how layered they are. On one level, it appears professional, almost procedural, event organizers managing the guest list, designers consulting each other. But beneath that lies a tangled web of personal relationships, grudges, and strategic ambitions. A designer slighted by Meghan at a previous gala might quietly influence the decision. A stylist seeking favor with a particular network could manipulate communications. PR teams, always calculating optics, may whisper concerns about public perception. Each small action is amplified when you're dealing with a public figure of Meghan's stature. Even the smallest gestures carry weight. A delayed response, a casual glance, or a whispered suggestion backstage can cascade into consequences felt on the red carpet. Meghan's exclusion was the result of this invisible machinery. It wasn't just a matter of who was invited. It was a statement, a signal, a calculated move that conveyed control and influence. Those orchestrating it understood the optics. The public would notice, the media would dissect, and the ripple effects would reach far beyond the event itself. Insiders later described the planning process in astonishing detail. Meetings were held in discreet locations, conversations veiled in professional language but heavy with implication. Phrases like, "It might be better if she doesn't attend," or "Let's keep the balance of appearances," were code for deeper strategies of exclusion. In the world of elite fashion, words are carefully chosen. Subtext is everything. The guest list became a battleground where personal agendas, professional alliances, and influence over public perception intersected. Meghan's presence, viewed as a threat by some and an opportunity by others, became the focal point of this invisible struggle. At the same time, the designers and event organizers were acutely aware of the consequences of a public misstep. The CFDA red carpet is broadcasted, photographed, and scrutinized by a global audience. Any visible tension could ignite speculation, media frenzy, or social media storms. The decision to exclude Meghan was deliberate but calculated to minimize immediate backlash while still asserting control. It was a delicate balance: assert authority without creating chaos, influence without inciting rebellion. And yet, despite careful planning, there were cracks in the execution. Staff hesitated, security communicated uncertainty, and the visual tension on the red carpet betrayed the meticulous backstage orchestration. Meghan, ever observant, noticed the subtle gestures, averted eyes, quick whispers, and hurried movements. She had been in high-pressure situations before, but this was different. Here, the exclusion was public, immediate, and unmistakable. The backstage power plays had become visible in real time, and everyone watching could feel the tension, even if they didn't understand the full story. Interestingly, these backstage dynamics are often fueled by contrasting motivations. Some operate from personal envy. Meghan's celebrity, elegance, and global influence were threatening to those accustomed to holding sway in fashion circles. Others act strategically, controlling who is visible, who is covered by media, who is positioned to benefit from attention. And still others operate defensively, protecting their alliances, ensuring that no single figure dominates the narrative. The combination of these forces creates a complex and often ruthless ecosystem, one in which public exclusion is a powerful tool of influence. Meghan's exclusion also highlights the gender dynamics in elite fashion. Women wield immense visibility but often navigate systems of judgment where inclusion can be contingent on favor, loyalty, or perceived compliance. For Meghan, the denial wasn't just a question of celebrity. It was a collision with these subtle, gendered power structures, amplified by her global visibility and public persona. And the decision-makers, aware of these dynamics, knew the stakes of every action, every word, every glance. Even more intriguing was the role of intermediaries, assistants, stylists, and PR teams who act as conduits between public figures and decision-makers. They are both enablers and barriers, shaping the flow of information and influencing perception. Meghan's staff attempted to clarify, negotiate, and mediate, but they were constrained by rules and authority. Each step was monitored, each action weighed. The backstage environment was a chessboard, and Meghan, for all her poise and strategic acumen, found herself a piece on the board rather than the player. What made the night especially volatile was timing. The exclusion happened at the precise moment when visibility mattered most. Cameras, social media, and live reporting converged to capture the moment, amplifying the impact exponentially. A private dispute or backstage strategy, normally invisible, had been transformed into a public spectacle. For Meghan, this meant that not only was she excluded, but the exclusion itself became a story, a symbol, a viral moment that would dominate conversation for days. And as the night unfolded, the interplay of power, influence, and perception became increasingly apparent. Some insiders reportedly took satisfaction in the orchestration, viewing it as a strategic assertion of control. Others were concerned about the optics, aware that public perception could turn against them. For Meghan, the public element added a layer of complexity. The world now interpreted her reaction, her silence, or her response in real time. She was no longer merely a participant. She had become a focal point in a narrative that had been carefully engineered behind the scenes. The consequences of these backstage power plays were not limited to one night. They extended into social media, media coverage, and even potential future collaborations. Invitations, coverage, and opportunities are currency in elite social circles, and exclusion from a high-profile event sends a signal to the entire ecosystem. Meghan's exclusion was both a punishment and a message: control visibility, manage influence, and assert authority. The reverberations would be felt for months, even years, in ways that were just beginning to emerge. And yet, despite the calculated maneuvering behind the scenes, not everyone was aligned. Small cracks appeared, whispers of sympathy among some designers, cautious glances from staff who understood the potential fallout, and private messages of concern from allies outside the immediate power circle. These subtle acts suggested that even in a highly controlled environment, influence is never absolute, and human empathy, curiosity, and strategic risk all play a role in how events unfold. As Meghan navigated the tense, heavily monitored red carpet, the unseen forces of backstage power continued their subtle orchestration. Every gesture, every glance, Every whispered decision was part of a carefully choreographed strategy that the public only partially perceived. The question lingering in everyone's mind, both insiders and viewers alike, was clear. How far would these power plays go? And what would be the ultimate outcome of a night designed to elevate influence, but now dominated by exclusion, tension, and high-stakes visibility? And then, just when it seemed that the backstage machinations had reached their peak, a private confrontation occurred that no cameras captured but would become pivotal. Whispers between influential figures hinted at decisions that went beyond protocol or precedent, actions motivated by personal vendettas, ambition, and strategic calculation. The implications were enormous. This wasn't just a denial of entry. It was a public demonstration of influence, control, and the fragile nature of celebrity status in the high-stakes world of fashion. What came next would escalate the drama exponentially, revealing not only the scope of the backstage power plays, but also the unseen alliances, rivalries, and personal stakes that had orchestrated Meghan's shocking exclusion. And no one, inside or outside the red carpet, was prepared for the consequences that were about to unfold. How quickly can a private exclusion turn into a global spectacle? Within minutes of Meghan Markle being stopped at the CFDA red carpet, the story escaped backstage whispers and became a worldwide headline. Cameras had captured subtle shifts in posture, measured facial expressions, and a controlled but unmistakable pause. The images alone were enough to ignite speculation. Social media, always hungry for drama, amplified every frame, every whispered conversation, every fleeting glance into a narrative that would dominate news cycles for days. The first wave came almost immediately. Journalists in the press pit began sending urgent messages, their fingers flying across keyboards to post live updates. Meghan Markle denied entry to CFDA Awards. One headline read, bold and attention-grabbing. Red carpet drama. Duchess stopped at the gates. Twitter erupted within seconds. Fans expressed disbelief and outrage. Critics weighed in with sharp commentary. Memes began circulating, each one exaggerating or interpreting the moment in a different way. The world, as it so often does, had turned a backstage decision into a viral moment of spectacle. The frenzy was fueled by the visuals. Photographers, trained to spot tension, had captured every nuance. Meghan standing poised yet puzzled, her eyes scanning for recognition or support, the subtle tension in her shoulders, the almost imperceptible contraction of her jaw as she processed the denial. Each frame told a story, and each story invited interpretation. Within minutes, these images were circulated across online news portals, celebrity blogs, and social media platforms. The narrative spread faster than anyone backstage could control. Meanwhile, Meghan's team worked feverishly to manage the optics. They contacted event organizers, clarified logistics, and sought to mediate misunderstandings. But the public narrative had already escaped their control. Social media users began theorizing wildly. Some blamed the CFDA organizers, others suspected rival designers, and some hinted at personal vendettas. Every reaction, from outrage to mockery, amplified the moment. Each tweet, post, or comment added layers of interpretation and speculation, and the story began to take on a life of its own. The media frenzy also highlighted a fascinating contradiction. While the public loves to see celebrities in moments of triumph, scandal, or drama, these moments are often curated, controlled, and carefully orchestrated. But when control is stripped away, as it was for Meghan, the audience becomes both observer and participant, interpreting every nuance without context. The cameras showed her pause, the world projected a story onto it, and suddenly, a backstage exclusion became a global narrative about power, influence, and status. Even traditional media outlets joined the frenzy. Television networks replayed the moment in slow motion, discussing every detail as pundits speculated about the implications. Fashion critics analyzed the possible reasons for her denial, citing potential rivalries, PR missteps, and power plays within the CFDA. Entertainment news shows debated whether this was a strategic rebuke or a simple logistical error. Every analysis, commentary, and hot take fed into the growing storm, leaving the audience with more questions than answers. Social media reactions were particularly telling. Memes ranged from humorous exaggeration to pointed criticism, framing Meghan's experience in ways that were sometimes sympathetic, sometimes mocking, and always viral. Twitter threads exploded with speculation. Why was she stopped? Who was behind this? Was this about fashion politics or personal rivalry? Instagram Reels captured moments in dramatic slow motion, often adding suspenseful music to heighten the tension. The public engagement was immense, with likes, shares, and comments piling up by the second. The event had gone beyond fashion. It had become a cultural moment, dissected and debated worldwide. The media frenzy also exposed a subtle but important truth about celebrity culture. Visibility is everything, but it is also fragile. One misstep, one decision, one carefully orchestrated exclusion can have massive consequences, not only for perception but also for influence, reputation, and opportunities. Meghan's denial became a perfect example. The incident highlighted how quickly the balance can shift in high-profile events, where backstage decisions collide with public scrutiny, creating narratives that no amount of planning or preparation can fully control. Meanwhile, the backstage environment was chaotic. Event organizers and PR teams were scrambling to manage the fallout. Calls were made, explanations were offered, but the optics were already irreversible. Designers, staff, and assistants moved quickly to contain the situation, yet each attempt to clarify or mediate was met with a barrage of public interpretation. The tension behind the scenes mirrored the frenzy outside. Those responsible for maintaining order now had to navigate a storm of speculation, media pressure, and public scrutiny, all while keeping the event running smoothly. What made the situation even more complicated were the subtle rivalries among celebrities themselves. Some took the opportunity to position themselves in the spotlight, highlighting their presence while Meghan's exclusion became the dramatic counterpoint. Others were silent, watching and calculating, waiting to see how the narrative would unfold. In elite circles, appearances are not just about fashion. They are about influence, power, and strategic advantage. Meghan's denial became a pivot point, an event around which alliances, rivalries, and public narratives began to crystallize. The emotional tension was palpable, both for Meghan and for those observing. For the public, the combination of live coverage, social media amplification, and media speculation created a sense of immediacy and intimacy with the drama. Fans debated her reaction, critiqued her composure, and speculated about her next moves. Critics analyzed the symbolism, reading meaning into each gesture and expression. The entire world seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the unfolding of the next chapter in this high-profile saga. And then came the viral twist. A short video clip emerged showing Meghan being politely but firmly redirected away from the entrance. The footage was seconds long, but it captured the essence of the moment: control, exclusion, and tension. It quickly spread across every platform, becoming the centerpiece of discussions, commentary, and memes. The clip not only validated the narrative of exclusion, but also amplified the emotional impact. Viewers were not just reading about it, they were witnessing it. The effect was immediate. The story escalated from a private backstage decision to a global spectacle, drawing attention from fans, critics, and celebrities alike. But even as the world watched, there was more happening behind the scenes than anyone could see. Private conversations, whispered explanations, and strategic decisions continued to shape the narrative. Designers and organizers debated how to manage the optics, concerned not only about Meghan's reaction but also about how the incident would affect future events, partnerships, and alliances. The media frenzy, while unpredictable, was also being monitored and, to some extent, managed, another layer in the complex interplay of visibility, influence, and control. The moment underscored a harsh reality of fame. Even global celebrities can be vulnerable to the calculated influence of others. Status, recognition, and access are never guaranteed. Every decision, every interaction, every relationship matters. And when a powerful network aligns against someone, the consequences can be immediate, public, and far-reaching. Meghan's experience at the CFDA red carpet became a case study in visibility, exclusion, and the invisible mechanisms that govern elite events. Yet, despite the intense media coverage and social media storm, Meghan's story was far from over. The exclusion, the whispers, the headlines. All of it was part of a larger narrative that few outside the inner circle fully understood. There were hidden motivations, personal rivalries, and strategic maneuvers that had led to this point, and the full impact had yet to be revealed. The media frenzy was just the surface, a glimpse of the complexity beneath. And as the night continued, as social media exploded and journalists debated the implications, a private confrontation behind the scenes began to unfold. This was a conversation that cameras wouldn't capture, a debate that reporters would never witness firsthand. But it was pivotal, an escalation that would determine not just Meghan's experience that night, but the trajectory of influence, alliances, and perception in the days and weeks to come. What came next would reveal the hidden dynamics of celebrity, the subtle power plays of the fashion world, and the personal stakes that made Meghan Markle's exclusion far more than a red carpet incident. The world was watching, but only part of the story was visible, and the next twist would shock everyone, insiders and public alike.